The Gallipoli Campaign, also known as the Dardanelles Campaign, the Battle of Gallipoli or the Battle of Çanakkale, was a campaign of World War I that took place on the Gallipoli Peninsula in the Ottoman Empire between the 25th of April 1915 and the 9th of January 1916. The peninsula forms the northern bank of the Dardanelles, a strait that provided a sea route to the Russian Empire, one of the Allied powers during the war. Intending to secure it, Russia's allies Britain and France launched a naval attack followed by an amphibious landing on the peninsula, with the aim of capturing the Ottoman capital of Constantinople. The naval attack was repelled, and after 8 months fighting, with many casualties on both sides, the land campaign was abandoned and the invasion force was withdrawn to Egypt. The campaign was one of the greatest Ottoman victories during the war. In Turkey, it is regarded as a defining moment in the nation's history, a final surge in the defense of the motherland as the Ottoman Empire crumbled. The struggle formed the basis for the Turkish War of Independence and the declaration of the Republic of Turkey 8 years later under Mustafa Kemal, who first rose to prominence as a commander at Gallipoli. The campaign is often considered as marking the birth of national consciousness in Australia and New Zealand, and the date of the landing, the 25th of April, is known as Anzac Day, which is the most significant commemoration of military casualties and veterans in those two countries, surpassing Remembrance Day. Background: Ottoman entry into the war. At the beginning of the 20th century, the Ottoman Empire had the reputation of being the sick man of Europe. Weakened by political instability, military defeat and civil strife following a century of decline. In 1908, a group of young officers, known as the Young Turks, seized power in Constantinople, while Mehmed V was later installed as a figurehead sultan in 1909. The new regime implemented a program of reform to modernize the outdated political and economic system and to redefine the racial makeup of the empire. An enthusiastic supporter, Germany provided significant investment. German diplomats subsequently found increasing influence, despite Britain previously being the predominant power in the region, while German officers assisted in training and re-equipping the army. Despite this support, the economic resources of the Ottoman Empire were depleted by the cost of the Balkan Wars of 1912 and 1913, and the French, British and Germans had offered financial aid. A pro-German faction influenced by Enver Pasha, the former Ottoman military attaché in Berlin, opposed the pro-British majority in the Ottoman cabinet and tried to secure closer relations with Germany. In December 1913, the Germans sent a military mission to Constantinople, headed by General Otto Liman von Sanders. The geographical position of the Ottoman Empire meant that Russia and her allies France and Britain had a significant interest in Turkish neutrality, in the event of war in Europe. During the Sarajevo crisis in 1914, German diplomats offered Turkey an anti-Russian alliance and territorial gains in Caucasia, northwest Iran and Trans-Caspia. The pro-British faction in the cabinet was isolated due to the British ambassador taking leave until the 18th of August. As the crisis deepened in Europe, Ottoman policy was to obtain a guarantee of territorial integrity and potential advantages, unaware that the British might enter a European war. On 30 July 1914, 2 days after the outbreak of the war in Europe, the Ottoman leaders agreed to form a secret Ottoman-German alliance against Russia, although it did not require them to undertake military action. On 2 August, the British requisitioned 2 modern battleships, Sultan Osman I Evel and Resadia, which British shipyards had started building for the Ottoman Navy, for their own use, alienating pro-British elements in Constantinople, despite the offer of compensation if they remained neutral. This action strained diplomatic relations between the two empires, and the German government offered SMS Goeben and SMS Breslau to the Ottoman Navy as replacements, in an attempt to gain influence. The Allies tried to intercept the ships, which escaped when the Ottoman government opened the Dardanelles to allow them passage to Constantinople, despite being required under international law, as a neutral party, to block military shipping. By allowing the German ships to enter the Dardanelles, the Ottomans confirmed their links to Germany. In September, the British naval mission to the Ottomans, which had been established in 1912 under Admiral Arthur Limpus, was recalled due to increasing concern that Turkey would soon enter the war. Rear Admiral Wilhelm Souchon of the Imperial German Navy took over command of the Ottoman Navy. Acting without orders from the Ottoman government, on the 27th of September the German commander of the Dardanelles fortifications ordered the passage closed, adding to the impression that the Ottomans were in the German camp. The German naval presence and the success of German armies on all fronts gave the pro-German faction in the Ottoman government enough influence to declare war on Russia. On the 27th of October, Gobin and Breslau, having been renamed Yavuz Sultan Selim and Midilli, sortied into the Black Sea, bombarded the Russian port of Odessa and sank several Russian ships. The Ottomans refused an Allied demand that they expel the German missions and on the 31st of October 1914, officially entered the war on the side of the Central Powers. Russia declared war on Turkey on the 2nd of November. The next day, the British ambassador left Constantinople and a British naval squadron off the Dardanelles bombarded the outer defensive forts at Kumkaylan, Sedolbahir. A shell hit a magazine, knocked the guns off their mounts and killed 86 soldiers. Britain and France declared war on Turkey on the 5th of November and the Ottomans declared a jihad later that month, launching an offensive in the Caucasus against the Russians to regain former Turkish provinces there. Fighting also began in Mesopotamia, following a British landing to occupy the oil facilities in the Persian Gulf. The Ottomans prepared to attack Egypt in early 1915, aiming to occupy the Suez Canal and cut the Mediterranean route to India and the Far East. Strachan wrote that in hindsight Ottoman belligerence was inevitable once Gobin and Breslau were allowed into the Dardanelles, and that delays after that were caused by Ottoman unreadiness for war and Bulgarian neutrality, rather than uncertainty about policy. Allied strategy in the Dardanelles. The British had planned to invade amphibiously near Alexandretta before the Dardanelles operation, with the idea, originally presented by Bofos-Nuba in 1914. It was planned by Field Marshal Lord Horatio Kitchener to sever the capital from Syria, Palestine, and Egypt. Alexandretta was an area with a Christian population and was the strategic center of the empire's railway network. Its capture would have cut the empire in two. Vice Admiral Sir Richard Peace, East Indies Station, ordered Captain Frank Larkin of HMS Doris to Alexandretta on 13 December 1914. At the same time, in the same area, the Russian cruiser Vaskold and the French cruiser Requin were performing similar operations. Kitchener was working on the plan as late as March 1915. This plan was also the beginning of Britain's successful effort to start an Arab revolt. The Alexandretta landing was abandoned because militarily it would have required more resources than France could allocate, and politically France did not want the British operating in their sphere of influence, a position to which Britain had agreed in 1912. However, by late 1914 the war on the Western Front had become a stalemate. The Franco-British counter-offensive of the First Battle of the Marne had ended and the British had suffered many casualties in the First Battle of Ypres in Flanders. Lines of trenches had been dug by both sides, running from the Swiss border to the English Channel. As the war of manoeuvre ended and trench warfare began, the German Empire in Austria-Hungary closed the overland trade routes between Britain and France in the west and Russia in the east. The White Sea in the Arctic North and the Sea of Okhotsk in the Far East were icebound in winter and distant from the Eastern Front. The Baltic Sea was blockaded by the Kaiserliche Marine, and the entrance to the Black Sea through the Dardanelles was controlled by the Ottoman Empire. While the empire remained neutral, supplies could still be sent to Russia through the Dardanelles. But prior to the Ottoman entry into the war, the straits had been closed, and in November they began to mine the waterway. French Minister of Justice Aristide Briand's proposal in November to attack the Ottoman Empire was rejected, and an attempt by the British to pay the Ottomans to join the Allied side also failed. Later that month, Winston Churchill, First Lord of the Admiralty, proposed a naval attack on the Dardanelles. Based in part on erroneous reports of Ottoman troop strength, Churchill wanted to use a large number of obsolete battleships, which could not operate against the German High Seas Fleet, in a Dardanelles operation, with a small occupation force provided by the army. It was hoped that an attack on the Ottomans would also draw Bulgaria and Greece into the war on the Allied side. On the 2nd of January 1915, Grand Duke Nicholas of Russia appealed to Britain for assistance against the Ottomans, who were conducting an offensive in the Caucasus. Planning began for a naval demonstration in the Dardanelles to divert troops from the Caucasian theatre of operations.